My daughter stopped calling me after her wedding until her husband called me crying. My daughter slowly cut contact after marrying into a controlling family. One night, her husband unexpectedly called me for help after realizing the toxic manipulation they were trapped in. Together, we worked to rebuild trust and rescue the family bond. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m., and for a split second, I thought I was dreaming. The room was dark except for the thin orange line of streetlight leaking through the blinds. My husband's steady breathing filled the quiet, and the old clock on my nightstand ticked like a heartbeat. No one ever called me that late anymore, not since my daughter stopped. I reached for the phone with a dull sense of dread pooling in my stomach. The screen glowed with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Hello? My voice sounded smaller than I expected. On the other end, there was silence, then a shaky breath. A man's voice, strained and unfamiliar, whispered, "Mrs. Carter, it's Daniel. I don't know who else to call. My daughter's husband." Something cold slid down my spine. Before I could ask what was wrong, I heard him choke back a sob. Not the polite, contained kind of crying, the kind that comes from a place too deep to control. "She's not okay," he said, "and I think it's my fault." I sat up in bed, the sheets rustling softly. My heart began to pound in my ears. 1,000 images flashed through my mind. My daughter's laugh, her wedding dress, the way her voice had slowly faded from my life like a radio losing signal. "Daniel," I said carefully, keeping my voice low so I wouldn't wake my husband. "What's going on? Where is Emma?" "She's asleep, finally. Her parents were here tonight. It got bad, really bad." I pressed my lips together, already feeling the familiar ache behind my eyes. Her parents, the same people who had slowly built a wall between me and my child, brick by quiet brick. "Talk to me," I said, and as he began to speak, his voice cracking and stumbling over itself, I realized this call wasn't just about one bad night. It was about years of damage that had finally started to show its cracks. Before Emma got married, our life had been simple in the best way. We talked almost every day. Sometimes it was just a 5-minute call while she walked from her apartment to her car. Sometimes it was long, winding conversations about nothing: what she cooked for dinner, a rude customer at work, the stray cat she kept feeding behind her building. I could always hear her smile through the phone. On Sundays, she used to come over for lunch. I'd make too much food like I always did: roasted chicken, potatoes with rosemary, a salad no one ever finished. The house would smell like garlic and warm bread. Emma would sit at the kitchen counter, kicking her feet against the cabinet doors, stealing bites before everything was ready. "Mom, you're going to turn me into a potato one day," she'd tease. I'd laugh and swat her hand away with a wooden spoon. "Better than letting you starve." Those little moments stitched my life together. They gave rhythm to my weeks. They reminded me that even as my daughter grew into her own woman, we still belonged to each other in quiet, ordinary ways. When she met Daniel, I was relieved at first. He seemed polite, attentive. He opened doors, asked thoughtful questions, brought flowers the first time he came for dinner. He called me ma'am until I insisted he stop. Emma looked happy-glowy, hopeful, the way young love makes people feel like the world is wide open. But after the wedding, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. It never is. Her calls became shorter, then less frequent. Texts that used to come with emoji voice notes turned into dry, one-word replies. "Busy, later, can't talk." When I asked when I could come visit, she hesitated. I could hear someone else in the room sometime, faint but present, like a shadow listening in. "We've just got a lot going on," she'd say. "Maybe next month." Next month kept getting pushed further away. I told myself not to be dramatic. Newlyweds are busy. Lives change. Children grow up. I repeated those sentences like prayers, hoping they would calm the tightness in my chest. But some nights, I'd scroll through old photos of us. Emma in her messy ponytail, flower on her cheek, laughing at something I'd said, and I'd feel like I was mourning someone who was still alive. I didn't realize then that the distance wasn't accidental. I didn't realize that while I was waiting patiently for my daughter to come back to me, someone else had been quietly teaching her how to stay away. Daniel's voice trembled on the phone, dragging me back to the present. "They don't like you," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like a confession. "They never have, and I didn't stop it. I thought keeping the peace was better than fighting. I thought Emma was stronger than this." My fingers tightened around the phone. My heart sank, but at the same time, something inside me finally clicked into place. "So what happened tonight?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "She broke down. She said she feels like she's losing herself, that she doesn't
know who she's allowed to love anymore. I closed my eye, quiet ache spreading through my chest. My daughter hadn't stopped calling me because she didn't love me. She had stopped because someone taught her that loving me was wrong. And now, the man who stood beside her was finally seeing the damage. Daniel stayed on the line, his breathing uneven, like he was afraid that if he stopped talking, the weight of everything would crush him. I don't even know where to start, he said quietly. They've always been intense. My parents believe family should be loyal above everything. No outsiders, no outside influence. I grew up thinking that was normal. I leaned back against my pillow, staring at the ceiling, where faint shadows from passing cars drifted like slow clouds. His words settled into me with a heavy familiarity. Control often hides behind the word loyalty. When Emma and I got engaged, he continued, my mom started making comments, little things. She'd say you were too involved, that you spoiled her, that she needed to learn to rely on us now, not you. My throat tightened. I remembered the first time Emma canceled Sunday lunch without rescheduling, the way she'd sounded distracted, distant. I had brushed it off then, unaware that seeds were being planted behind my back. I should have shut it down, Daniel said, his voice cracking. But I didn't want conflict. My dad gets loud when he feels challenged, so I just nodded, changed the subject, told myself it wasn't a big deal. I exhaled slowly. Sometimes silence teaches people they're allowed to keep going. There was a long pause. I could almost hear him absorbing that truth. Tonight, he said finally, they came over unannounced. My mom went straight into criticizing Emma, how she's gained weight, how she's not managing the house the way a proper wife should, how she spends too much time on the phone with distractions. My jaw clenched. Emma had always been sensitive. Words stuck to her like burrs on fabric. I could imagine her standing there, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the floor, absorbing every cutting remark. She tried to defend herself, Daniel said, and that's when my dad snapped. He said, your mother is trying to protect you from being controlled by outsiders. Outsider. The word echoed in my head like a slap. That's when Emma just collapsed, he whispered. She started crying, not quiet, like something broke open. She said she felt trapped, that she wasn't allowed to breathe without disappointing someone. She locked herself in the bedroom and didn't come out for an hour. I pictured my daughter alone in a room, shaking, probably hugging her knees like she used to when she was overwhelmed as a child. My chest ached with helplessness. And you? I asked gently. I finally told them to leave, he said. For the first time in my life, I told my parents to leave my house. My hands were shaking. My dad stared at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. There was a strange mixture of pain and pride in his voice. They accused me of choosing you and Emma over them, he added bitterly, like love is some kind of competition. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. It shouldn't be. He was quiet again, then softer. Emma asked me if you hated her now. My heart shattered into quiet pieces. Hated her? I whispered. She said she hasn't called you in months, that every time she tried, my mom's voice echoed in her head, telling her she was being weak, dependent, childish. She said she didn't know how to come back to you without feeling like she was betraying someone. Tears slipped down my cheeks, warm against my skin. Oh, honey, I murmured, though he couldn't see me. She could never betray me by loving me. He sniffed, clearly crying now too. I know that now. I didn't then. I was blind, or scared, or both. We sat in that shared grief for a few seconds, connected by the quiet hum of the phone line and the weight of regret. What do you need from me, Daniel? I asked finally. His voice wavered. I don't know how to fix this, but I know Emma needs you. She needs her mom. I was hoping maybe you could come see her or call her. I'm afraid if I don't help her reconnect, she's going to disappear inside herself. I wiped my cheeks with the back of my hand, grounding myself. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the pillow spray I used every night. The normalcy of it contrasted sharply with the emotional storm brewing in my chest. I'll call her tomorrow, I said without hesitation. If she answers, she will, he said quickly. I'll make sure she knows you're calling. I'll tell her everything we talked about. I hesitated. Be gentle. She's already hurting. I will, he promised. And thank you.
For not yelling at me. I deserve it. I thought about the young man who had sat at my kitchen table years ago, nervously complimenting my cooking, trying so hard to make a good impression. People are rarely villains in their own story. Sometimes they're just afraid children trying to survive the families they came from. Just do better now, I said quietly. That's all any of us can do. We ended the call not with closure, but with fragile hope. The next morning,
Sunlight crept through the curtain, pale and gentle. I barely slept. My mind replayed Daniel's words over and over, stitching together months of confusion into a painful, coherent picture. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching a squirrel balance clumsily on the fence. My hands trembled slightly as I wrapped them around the warm mug. At 9:02 a.m., I dialed Emma's number. It rang once, twice. My breath caught, and I heard her voice, soft, hesitant. "Mom?" One small word, and suddenly years of distance collapsed into a single fragile moment. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've missed you." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. "I've missed you too," she whispered, and in that whisper, I heard everything she hadn't been allowed to say. Her voice trembled, fragile as glass, and I could hear the tension she'd carried for months, maybe years, bending and cracking with every word. I didn't know how to call," she said finally. I thought maybe you hated me." "Oh, honey," I whispered, pressing my palm against my chest as if I could physically hold the worry in place. "I could never hate you. You're my daughter. Nothing you've done or not done could ever change that." There was a pause, a long, shivering pause. Then she said, "It's them, Mom, my in-laws. They've been controlling everything, and I just froze." I nodded to myself, even though she couldn't see me. I understood. I'd felt that same icy weight when someone you love is trapped in fear. My stomach twisted with anger and sorrow, but mostly sorrow. Sorrow that my little girl had had to endure this in silence. "Emma, listen to me. You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere, but you need to tell me everything you're ready to share." She sniffled. "I can't, not all at once, but I can start." I settled into my chair, my mug of cold coffee forgotten, and let her pour herself out. She spoke of little things first, the subtle digs at her choices, the guilt trips over visits, the way Daniel's parents treated her as fragile or incompetent, then the bigger things, arguments orchestrated to isolate her, threats disguised as concern, the way her phone calls to me had been monitored, commented on, and discouraged. I listened in stunned silence, letting every word sink in. There was rage in me, yes, but it was mingled with an even stronger impulse. Protect, repair, restore. When she finally paused, exhausted from the flood of pent-up fear and sorrow, I whispered, "You did the right thing by telling me. The first step is always the hardest." "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice small. "You'll do what you need to do," I said firmly, "and we'll do it together. You're not powerless. You never were. You just needed someone to remind you." We hung up with the fragile plan to meet the next day.
I barely slept again that night, my mind racing through practicality, how to approach Daniel, how to protect my daughter, how to make sure she felt safe again. The next afternoon, I arrived at their apartment, carrying a small bag of snack, peanut butter cookies, fresh fruit, thermos of tea. Old habits, yes, but I knew they'd help her feel grounded. Daniel opened the door, face drawn, eyes wary but full of relief. He stepped aside to let me in, his voice shaking slightly. "She's in the bedroom," he said. She said she's scared." I smiled softly at him. "I know, that's okay." Emma peeked around the door frame, her hair falling in loose strands across her face, cheeks flushed from crying. For a moment, she looked like the little girl I remember, the one who used to hide behind the curtains during hide and seek, giggling and peeking with wide, anxious eyes. "Mom," she whispered, her voice quivering. I knelt down to her level and opened my arms. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "Come here." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she walked forward, and when she leaned into me, her body trembling, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. She was home, not in a house, not in a city, but in the safe space of being her mother's child again. We sat on the floor, knees touching, and I let her speak while I held her hand. Daniel joined us eventually, sitting on the edge of the bed, his own hands clasped nervously in his lap. He had tears in his eyes, but they were quieter now, controlled, strong, finally, for his wife. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Emma said softly. "I didn't mean to disappear.
I thought I had to protect everyone. Me, Daniel, everyone. But I was just protecting them from me. You were protecting yourself, I corrected gently. And that's not wrong. You don't have to apologize for surviving. Her shoulders sagged, the weight of guilt slowly lifting. Daniel reached out and squeezed her hand. I was scared too, he admitted. I didn't know how to fight my own family, but I want to be better. I want us to be free. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes love isn't just waiting, it's standing ready, even when the person you love doesn't know they need you. Over the next few weeks, the three of us worked together quietly and carefully. Calls with Emma became frequent again. Short texts turned into long conversations, and I slowly got to know Daniel not as an obstacle, but as a partner in rebuilding what had been broken. Emma began setting boundaries with her in-laws. At first, it was small things, declining unannounced visits, turning off notifications for passive-aggressive texts. Then, bigger steps, standing firm when criticized, leaving rooms during arguments, refusing to let anyone diminish her voice. Daniel supported her, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes tenderly. He apologized for his silence in the past, and Emma forgave him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And me, I let myself hope again. Hope for restored trust, for laughter around the kitchen table, for the smell of roasted chicken on Sundays, for hugs that weren't interrupted by fear. One quiet evening after dinner, Emma rested her head on my shoulder as we watched old home videos. Could smell her shampoo, lavender, and something faintly sweet. And for the first time in months, I felt the tension in my chest ease. "Mom," she whispered, "I forgot how safe it feels." "Safe is what we make it," I replied, "and you helped me make it too." I realized then that family isn't always about proximity or calls or even frequent visits. It's about connection, about trust, about showing up when it matters most. And sometimes the people you need to save most aren't just your children. They're the ones standing silently beside them, waiting for permission to do better. In the weeks that followed, Emma's voice returned to our daily life like sunlight after a long winter. Calls came in the morning, mid-afternoon, and sometimes late at night, her way of testing boundaries, of reclaiming a piece of her world that had been quietly stolen. Each time I felt the knot of anxiety in my chest loosen a little more, but rebuilding wasn't smooth. One afternoon, Daniel called me in a panic. "They're here," he whispered, voice tight, almost shaping. "My parents, they're at the door. They're—" "Breathe," I said firmly. "Emma, are you there?" "Yes," she replied, her voice small. I could hear the panic in the background, the clink of dishes, the muffled thud of furniture being rearranged. "Stay calm, stay together," I instructed, my own hands trembling around the phone. "Don't open the door. You're allowed to say no." Emma's voice wavered. "Mom, they're threatening to call the police if we don't let them in. They're saying we're breaking the family, that Daniel's abandoning them." I took a deep breath, grounding myself. "It's okay. You are not abandoning anyone by protecting yourselves. You are standing up for your home, your peace. That's what makes a family strong." We spent the next 20 minutes on speakerphone, walking Daniel and Emma through every word, every gesture, every response. They stayed firm, eventually convincing the parents to leave, though the tension in the air didn't fully dissipate. But Emma's relief was palpable. She had learned that she could assert herself, that she had a voice that couldn't be silenced. That night, when I finally spoke to her alone, she said quietly, "I didn't know I could do that. Stand up without trembling." "You could," I said softly. "You just needed someone to remind you that your life belongs to you, not to their fears." It was during one of our Sunday lunches, months later, that the real change crystallized. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary drifted from the oven, the way it had years ago when she was a teenager. The table was set for 3, though Daniel lingered near the doorway, hesitant, like a guest still unsure of his welcome. Emma smiled at me over the rim of her glass. "I've missed this," she said. "I didn't realize how much I missed it." Her words were a balm. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "I've missed you too, every single day." Daniel grinned awkwardly. "I think I've been learning a lot too," he admitted. "Mostly that my parents aren't always right, and that sometimes the best way to love someone is to listen to them first." I felt warmth spread spreading through my chest. He had finally begun to understand that loyalty doesn't mean control.
It means trust, and the shift in him mirrored the shift in my daughter. Stronger, steadier, more certain. Over time, the calls from her in-laws decreased. Their visits became regulated, and Emma began hosting her own little traditions. Sunday lunch, movie nights, board games, all without interference. She'd invite Daniel's parents only when she felt ready, and the control that once threatened to isolate her had lost its grip. One quiet evening, Emma came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes, her hair damp from the shower, a tired but genuine smile on her face. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for never giving up on me." I felt tears prick at my eye. "You don't need to thank me, sweetheart. I just waited. I always wait for you." She hugged me tightly, and I could feel her exhale, the surrender of months of tension, fear, and guilt. The relief was almost audible. Weeks later, Daniel called me from work. "Mrs. Carter," he said, voice steadier, "I just wanted to say thank you for everything, for trusting me, even when I didn't deserve it, for being there for Emma. I see now how love isn't about following someone else's rules. It's about standing together, even when it's hard." I smiled, feeling a quiet sense of pride. "You're learning. That's what counts." He hesitated. "Do you think we can ever fully repair what's been broken?" I closed my eyes for a moment. Repair doesn't always mean perfect. It means trying, showing up, being honest. You've already started, and that's when I realized the true lesson. Sometimes the people we love the most are trapped not by distance or silence, but by the invisible chains of others' expectation. Our job isn't to break those chains for them. It's to help them see they have the strength to do it themselves, with our support beside them. When I hung up, I looked around my quiet house. The faint smell of lavender lingered. The clock ticked steadily, and for the first time in months, I felt peace settle into the corners of my heart. Emma was learning to live as herself again. Daniel was learning to stand by her, not above her. And I was learning that sometimes love isn't just patient, it's steadfast, even when the calls stop, even when the world insists on control. The turning point came one Sunday afternoon, quiet and unremarkable on the surface, but monumental in the ways that mattered. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for lunch, the rhythmic thunk of the knife against the board grounding me, when I heard the soft click of the front door. Emma and Daniel appeared together, laughing quietly at some shared joke. Emma's hair was loosely tied, her cheeks flushed from the crisp winter air outside. She looked free, not the tentative, anxious version of herself I'd met months ago, but my daughter, confident, present, alive. "Mom," she said softly, stepping into the kitchen, "we brought something." Daniel held a small box between them. I raised an eyebrow, curious. Emma smiled shyly. "It's not much," she said, "but it's a start." She handed me the box. Inside were handwritten notes, little cards and letters, some from Emma herself, some from Daniel, and even one I recognized as having been written by me years ago when she was 10, tucked into her journal. "I wanted us to start a new tradition," she said. Her voice was firm now, a tremor gone. "Every month we write something we're grateful for, something we want to protect about this family, and put it here, a reminder that we're choosing each other."
I felt tears prick at my eyes. The gesture was small, yet monumental. A family choosing each other. Not under pressure, not out of guilt, but consciously, lovingly. "You're choosing well," I said, my voice catching, and I couldn't be prouder. Daniel grinned, though his eyes shone with a quiet emotion I knew all too well. "I'm learning from the best," he said, "and from the woman who taught her daughter how to fight without fear." Emma rolled her eyes but laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. I breathed in the moment, the aroma of onions sautéing, the faint hum of the radiator, the distant sound of children playing outside. It was ordinary, but ordinary had never felt so sacred. Weeks turned into months, and our lives gradually returned to a rhythm that felt natural again. Emma called regularly, sometimes multiple times a day. Sometimes we didn't speak for hours, and that was okay. Daniel had become a bridge, a quiet ally who who understood that love was not control and that loyalty was demonstrated through support, not obedience. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, Emma joined me. She leaned against the railing, her breath misting in the cold winter air. "Mom," she said, "do you ever think about how far we've come?" "All the time," I replied, letting the warmth of the mug seep into my fingers. "I think about the nights I cried quietly in bed, missing you, and the mornings I forced myself to believe you'd come back when you were ready. And here we are." She smiled faintly, a mixture of reflection and relief. "I was so scared of making you angry, of disappointing you. But I see now that love isn't about fear. It's about showing up, even when it's messy." I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It always was about showing up, Emma. You didn't know it, but I never stopped." She leaned into my hand, letting herself feel the warmth, the safety. I realized that healing doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It's a series of small acts, of returning again and again until the distance finally disappears. Not long after, Daniel made a quiet decision.
He spoke to his parents, gently but firmly, about boundary. They resisted at first, their old patterns clashing against his newfound resolve, but he remained calm, consistent. Emma was proud, and I was quietly amazed at how far this young man had grown, not because of anything I taught him, but because he had chosen to act differently. The bond between my daughter and me was no longer fractured. The silences that had haunted my heart were replaced with laughter, with confessions, with ordinary daily life that carried extraordinary meaning. One evening, after a long day, I found Emma in the kitchen, humming while washing dishes. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching her. "Mom," she said softly, "thank you for not giving up, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every lonely night, every unanswered call, every pang of worry finally lift. "You never had to thank me, sweetheart. You were always enough. And now you know it too." She smiled, and it wasn't shy or tentative. It was whole, complete, and filled with the strength that comes from being seen and loved unconditionally. Later, as I sat alone on the porch, the stars just beginning to prick the sky with light, I reflected on everything that had happened. Life doesn't always give us neat resolutions. Pain leaves traces, and control leaves scars. But love, steady, persistent, patient, can mend what fear and manipulation try to break. I whispered into the night, as if speaking to anyone listening. Sometimes the people we love most need us to wait, trust, and to never let go. Even when they push us away, they need us to believe in them until they can believe in themselves. Would you have waited as I did? Would you have chosen love over anger, patience over pride? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched you, consider subscribing to hear more real human stories about family, love, and the quiet power of persistence. Because in the end, family is never perfect, but it is always worth fighting for.